Please watch the latest world news. Ukraine repels Russia and regains part of the land in Donetsk. Russia warns of consequences if nuclear war breaks out. Ukraine says Russia will not allow North Korean forces to continue fighting. Ukraine is ready to negotiate and sign a peace agreement with Russia. Foreign ministers of Russia, Ukraine, and the United States clashed when they met face to face at the meeting. NATO discusses ceasefire in Ukraine. Ukraine repels Russia and regains part of the land in Donetsk. Dear friends, on December 5, Nazar Voloshin, spokesman for the Coalition forces, Ukraine, said that Kiev forces had pushed Russian units out of the village of Novy Komar, Donetsk province, located near the city of Vuhledar, currently controlled by Russia, according to the Kyiv Independent. A day earlier, the community monitoring website Deep State reported that soldiers from Ukraine's 48th Assault Battalion had regained control of the village. According to Deep State, Russian troops suffered heavy losses and some Moscow soldiers fled to a nearby highway. According to the Kyiv Independent, the Ukrainian counterattacks are insignificant compared to Russia's ongoing offensive on the Eastern Front. In mid-November, Russia seized 234.79 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory in just 1 week, the highest figure in 2024. According to Russia's agency STVO news agency, Ukrainian officials are also increasingly concerned about the possibility of a new Russian offensive in Zaporizhia province. The pace of Russia's offensive has accelerated in recent months, while the Ukrainian army has struggled to replenish troops, weapons and supplies from the West that have not met Kiev's expectations. In its December 5 combat update, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said that Ukrainian defense forces continued to hold back the fierce offensive of Russian forces, effectively inflicting fire damage on the enemy, exhausting Moscow troops on the entire front line, according to the ministry's Facebook page. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, on December 5, there were a total of 170 clashes between Russian and Ukrainian forces. Russian troops fired 4 missiles, deployed 599 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and carried out more than 3.20 artillery strikes on troop concentrations and settlements in Ukraine. In the Kharkiv direction, Russian troops unsuccessfully attacked the positions of Ukrainian units in the Novokrugliakivka, Lozova and Sinkivka areas 6 times. In Donetsk Oblast, Russian troops launched heavy attacks on the cities of Lyman, Terezhsk, Siversky, Pokrovsky, and Kharkiv. The situation in the Pokrovsky and Kharkiv directions remains tense, as Moscow's troops are focusing their main offensive efforts on these 2 cities. Specifically, in Pokrovsky, Russian troops launched 44 attacks in the past day, targeting the settlements of Myrolyubivka, Promen, Lysivka, Dashenska, Jovte, Pushkin, Novotroitska, Shevchenko and Novopustinka. The General Staff said that the Ukrainian side had eliminated 450 Russian soldiers from the battle, as well as destroyed many enemy weapons on this front. In Kharkiv, Russian troops launched 47 attacks in the past day, targeting the settlements of Berestki, Stary Turny, Zori, Sontsivka, Karakovo, Dalny, Elizavetivka, Hanovka, Romanivka and Uspenivka. The Ukrainian side repelled all 47 Russian attacks. Russia warns of consequences if nuclear war breaks out. It is impossible to win a nuclear war, so nuclear war cannot happen. This is absolutely in our vital interests, and we hope that this is also in the vital interests of the United States. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in an interview with U.S. journalist Tucker Carlson published on December 5. Mr. Lavrov stressed that Russia continues to adhere to the positions stated at the bilateral summit between Moscow and Washington in 2021 and reaffirmed at the meeting in the 5-way format in 2022. We do not want war with anyone. The 5 nuclear states declared at the highest level in January 2022 that we do not want confrontation with each other and that we will respect each other's interests and security concerns. The same was reiterated bilaterally between Russia and the United States. when the leaders of Russia and the United States met in Geneva in June 2021. Mr. Lavrov added. Foreign Minister Lavrov warned that the West's idea that Russia's red lines could be shaken was a mistake. Big mistake. He also noted that statements by some NATO officials about the possibility of a preemptive strike on Russia are worrying. Some officials at the Pentagon and elsewhere, including NATO, have begun to say in recent days that NATO is a defensive alliance, but that NATO may sometimes strike first because attack is the best defense. Lavrov said, warning that such threats are really worrying. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is at a dangerous turning point as both sides have taken bold steps recently. The West has begun to allow Kiev to use long-range weapons donated by these countries to strike deep into Russia. In response, Russian President Vladimir Putin approved a revised nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for nuclear use, drawing a new red line with the West. Russia also launched a new generation of Oreshnik medium-range hypersonic missiles at a military-industrial complex in Ukraine. Ukraine says Russia will not allow North Korean forces to continue fighting. Pyongyang is believed to have deployed 10.00 to 12.00 troops to Russia to support Moscow in its conflict with Ukraine. According to Ukrainian and Western sources, some of the North Korean forces have been deployed to Russia's Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces are in control of several settlements after a lightning offensive in early August. The National Resistance Center of Ukraine said that under the command of Russia's 11th Air Assault Brigade, the North Korean forces have been tasked with protecting Russian troop concentrations. The involvement of North Korean forces has allowed Moscow to deploy more Russian troops to frontline positions. A Ukrainian military intelligence spokesman told the media that 2.00 North Korean troops have been deployed to Russian Marine and Air Force units fighting on the front line. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov said on November 27 that North Korean forces are actively supporting Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Although Umerov did not provide details, North Korea is believed to have supplied Russia with ballistic missiles and artillery shells since the conflict in Ukraine began. Moscow and Pyongyang signed a strategic partnership agreement in June, pledging to provide each other with military support if either country comes under attack. Ukraine ready to negotiate and sign a peace deal with Russia. The Wall Street Journal, WSJ, cited sources as saying that Ukraine plans to make a statement about its readiness to negotiate and sign a deal with Russia. The sources confirmed that Kiev will declare it is ready for peace, but it must be a sustainable peace. According to the sources, Andriy Yermak, Chief of Staff of President Volodymyr Zelensky, has traveled to Washington to establish relations with the team of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. The WSJ also noted that the meeting with the Ukrainian delegation included U.S. Vice President-elect James David Vance, Trump's future National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, and Keith Kellogg, the person the 47th boss at the White House wants to appoint as special envoy to Ukraine. Earlier, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha announced that Chief of Staff Yermak had traveled to the U.S. to hold meetings, including with representatives of Mr. Trump. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has also repeatedly admitted that there is a risk that Washington will stop supporting Kiev if Mr. Trump returns to the White House. Russian, Ukrainian, U.S. foreign ministers spar as they meet face-to-face at meeting. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha harshly criticized his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov on December 5 as both diplomats attended an international meeting in Malta. This is Lavrov's first visit to an EU country since the Russia-Ukraine conflict broke out in 2022. Sybiha accused Moscow of being the biggest threat to our common security, as both ministers sat at a large table at a meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE. According to a diplomatic source, officials from Poland and Latvia, among others, left the meeting room when Lavrov spoke at the meeting in Malta. The OSCE, a 57-nation organization founded during the Cold War, has been virtually paralyzed since Moscow launched a special military operation in Ukraine. Lavrov, seated between representatives from San Marino and Romania, accused NATO and the EU of politicizing the OSCE and making it ineffective. He accused the West of being behind the revival of the Cold War, with the risk of a hot war much higher, according to Russia's RIA Novosti news agency. Lavrov also said the West had failed to heed Moscow's very clear warnings about the risks of a scenario in which the West sent troops to support Ukraine. When it was his turn to speak, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin for his project that could wipe Ukraine off the map. He also accused Lavrov, who had left the room, of spreading a series of false information. NATO discusses move to ceasefire in Ukraine. Ukraine's Western backers are shifting from pushing for a military victory over Russia to trying to put Kiev in the best position to negotiate a ceasefire. Bloomberg reported, citing people familiar with the matter. The report comes as Russian forces advance into Donbass at a pace not seen since 2022, while also reclaiming territory from entrenched Ukrainian forces in Russia's Kursk region. With U.S. President-elect Donald Trump less than 2 months away from taking office, Kiev's NATO allies are trying to shore up morale as it begins to wane. Bloomberg wrote, while Trump's plans for Ukraine remain unclear, he has promised to cut Pentagon spending on the conflict and focus on domestic U.S. issues. Foreign ministers from NATO countries met in Brussels this week to discuss ways to provide more weapons to Kiev. Anonymous sources told Bloomberg, noting that any plans were private and not yet finalized. They are also said to have begun looking at different ways to end the conflict, including discussing what security guarantees could protect Ukraine from Russia. Those discussions come as NATO foreign ministers acknowledge that the situation in Ukraine is unsustainable, and talks will begin soon. Bloomberg reported, citing a senior Western diplomat. One idea being floated is to create a demilitarized zone, with European troops responsible for its security. The news agency quoted another senior NATO diplomat as saying,
"The news on Hot News Channel 24 hours will stop here. If you find the video content interesting, please like, comment and share. You and your friends click subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon in the bottom right corner of the screen to receive notifications of the latest uploaded videos. Thank you."